Welcome to Carltim, Pallisades, a ZX Media Group production. I am Tim, and I'm here with David. But we are connected to the dirt. Gaia, Mother Earth, the third planet from the sun, our home. We have been changing the weeds we have found to eat since we're groups of hunters and gatherers. Not unlike the tribes that once rode the upper northern plains for millennia, our planet has brought forth another challenge to us for once again reminding us that the importance of sustainable and natural access to food and plants. We are here today with David Shirley, and we're going to discuss these natural and plants and cultivation ideas with you. First of all, I said, who are you, what's your background, and how did you get turned into natural and native gardening?
Yeah, so my name's Dave Shirley. I'm Carlos's father. And how did I get tuned into this area is, and more it's like native plant gardening, right? Was frankly living in Michigan in a house where we had lawn in a low-lying area, and it tended to have, and it was moist, it tended to have frogs, it tended to have some snakes, and we would be mowing the lawn, and we'd be hitting these animals. And I was just going, this is so ridiculous, and I just didn't want to do it. And I'd always been kind of a little environmentalist my whole life, right? And so I'd started hearing about native plants and so forth, and so we decided to kill all the grass in the front yard. We lived in a neighborhood where this wasn't such a big deal, right? Kill all the grass in the front yard and planted all the native plants.
Yeah.
And
was that a difficult locating the seeds, or how did that come about? I mean, that seems like a fairly involved ordeal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it was. It wasn't so hard thanks to a few businesses in Michigan, right? So there's a place. This is Michigan, so it doesn't help people here in North Dakota, but a place called Wild Type. And this guy had been doing like native prairie restorations and native plant restorations on a large scale for many years. And so we had all kinds of plants that you could buy, lots of knowledge about the conditions under which they could grow. And we were doing a big enough area that he was interested, and he came out and he took a look at it and gave us some recommendations and so forth. So, I mean, it was kind of a big deal to do it, right? It was a decent bit of work because it was a pretty big area. But in terms of finding material and figuring out what to do, that really made it a lot easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it does help having somebody who is more, I guess, custom or experienced with this, basically a consultant, to kind of lay out kind of a plan.
Yeah, so I would say, look, for sure it helps. For sure it's not necessary, right?
Okay.
Because increasingly there are all kinds of resources online for finding out what plants are native to your area, right? And it seems like in the little bit of searching I've been doing, it seems like there are not a lot of areas, a lot of places here in North Dakota where you can get the plants, but there seem to be a few. Yeah. There's a place called Prairie Restorations, Inc. There's a place called the Fargo Project, Going Native. And there's a place called Gardenia, Creating Gardens, seems like they might have some native plants. We should talk a little bit about, what do we really even mean by native plants, right? And why do we care about it?
Yeah, before this podcast, we discussed Buffalo River State Park has a natural prairie, and then I think I don't know if they're also it's south and a little west of here. You've got natural prairie lands. And there's actually a new park system that was a trail system. I can't remember that.
Well, they've been doing prairie restoration.
Prairie restoration. It's just natural prairie grass the way it was, before development and agricultural development.
And they made it back that way, in other words. I mean, it had gone out of it, and they put it back into it.
Yeah, exactly. Or it was somebody who was ranching, they said, well, I'm done with ranching and don't have anybody, and then here, have this gave to the state or something
Exactly,
along
like
that
the Nature
line.
Conservancy or
Exactly.
restoration,
Yeah. So what is the importance of having native
Yeah.
plants?
So the key thing is this. I mean, if you, some people might have seen this article about 3 years ago where they did this data collection, basically collection of all kinds of insects in a very systematic way in Germany. And they estimated that over the past 30 years, 75% of the amount of insects, had fallen by 75%.
Wow.
Now, since that time, there have been bigger and broader studies, and so the estimates now are that globally, land-based insects have fallen 25% in the past 25 or 30 years, right? So this is just a huge decrease. Well, why do we care about insects? They're mosquitoes. They bite us. They're moths. They make holes in our clothes. Why do we care about them? Well, we care about them because they're by far the main source of food for birds, for example, number one. Number two, they're massive pollinators. So if we think about food production, agriculture depends on very much. A lot of major crops depend on pollinators, and it's not just honeybees. It's moths and honeybees and native bees and all kinds of other plant visitors that do the pollination. So as these numbers begin to collapse, you can have cascading effects on bird life, cascading effects on our even agricultural production, and other things. So and then the other thing is that native plants generally support a lot more insect life than introduced plants, right? Because the bugs evolved with the plants.
Yeah.
You bring in a new plant, the bugs haven't really evolved for it, right? So it's in that way it's really simple.
Also, too, it's like in the obviously our Kentucky bluegrass, or what we want to call our lawns, are not necessarily native to the area, and they require some specific, usually chemical additives. And if you go, even a portion of your lawn goes native, that means less of that phosphate to be run off.
Nitrogen, phosphate, everything else. No, the lawn industry in the U.S. is terrifying in terms of the insect killing chemicals that it uses, right? Both for ground and for above ground, and then for the amount of fertilizer. And the fertilizer runs off and runs into waterways and causes algal blooms and so on and so forth. So, like if farmers used as much chemicals per acre as a common homeowner does, they would go broke in a year, because the amount is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So you can just turn a little bit of your lawn into something like this and make a big difference.
So one of the, I guess, drawbacks is that, native plants were not used to the word I'm kind of the dichotomy, the difference of that in our landscape. And some would say they're eyesores.
Right.
What are the, we've been talking about the bonuses, which is less chemical additives to support this. And then native plants usually are less reliant on, they're more hardy. They don't require you to water them as much and fertilize as well.
Right.
What other, I think they're kind of beautiful in their own right, I guess.
Exactly. So it all depends on what you think. I mean, I wanted to pick up on your one point about not needing so many chemicals on it. One, they don't need the chemicals nearly as much. They could benefit from them, maybe, right? But they don't need them as much because, as you said, they're adapted to the conditions. But then also, most people that are interested in native plants, right, are also interested in not putting chemicals in.
Exactly.
Right? So it kind of goes together. So very few native plant gardeners tend to use either zero or very few chemicals. So that just kind of goes along with it. So the eyesore, it's really two things. First of all, you can plant native plants in a structured way that looks more like a real, a traditional garden, right? So if you're concerned about just, a whole bunch of different plants kind of growing randomly, and you don't think that that's pretty, or you think your neighbors aren't going to like it, you can do native plant gardening in a structured way. It can look like a traditional garden to a large extent. But then it does become a lot of people, I think their aesthetics then evolve, right? And just then the beauty of, in May you've got certain plants flowering, and then in June others, and all the way out into September you've got the New England asters and the white asters and other stuff blooming, and this kind of changing panorama of stuff blooming becomes beautiful.
Well, and when you're talking about native plants, you're not necessarily talking about specifically just like low-growing shrubbery or plants. You're also talking about their bushes or
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, personally, I'm more knowledgeable about the what you call forbs. So
Forb.
these are, not bushes, not trees. Other plants, right? But yeah, absolutely, native bushes, native trees. There are a lot of invasive trees and introduced trees that support like zero insect life, like the Norway maple, which became very popular, and among gardeners and homeowners. Why? Because it didn't get attacked by insects. But that means it doesn't support insect life, right? Compared to a native oak that supports something like 200 different insect species, right? In different phases of their. So yeah, shrubs and trees, native shrubs and trees are a key part of it. And like honeysuckle and other trees can be highly invasive, these introduced ones.
So basically, your journey started by what can we do to kind of change, our immediate landscape, and you
Right.
went forth. And what do you suggest for like others? I mean, you mentioned a number of websites. Are there books and stuff like that?
There are books.
Okay.
So a good place to start is the author Douglas Tallamy, and I think that'll be put up maybe at the end of the show.
Okay.
He's written several books directed to the suburban gardener, to kind of make natives seem less exotic, explain their benefits, make them seem less difficult, less exotic, and get people into them. And so he's a good entry point, right? And then he's a good entry point for how to do it, and not make your neighbors mad, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he's got a lot of resources in the back of the book too about different places where you can find. And then it's a matter of Googling, and I mentioned a few here, there's prairie restorations and others. But Googling in your area to find out native plant suppliers, right?
I believe, I have seen a number of yards that have kind of actually done that, just kind of.
Like a mix, a seed mix,
mix,
right? And so you got stuff growing in.
And there's basically no lawn mowing there,
Right.
So you just let the plants grow, and then, I guess fall comes and you just kind of let it all go down.
Yeah, you let it go down now. You can, it actually, like if you do plant from seed, if somebody wants to plant from seed, then it's actually helpful for maybe a couple years. Once it gets to like 6, 8, 10 inches, in fact, if you can mow it that high, to mow it, because these natives are perennials, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the weeds are annuals.
Yeah.
So if you cut it when they're 6, 8, 10 inches high, the native perennials are going to keep going and they're going to come back next year. Whereas the annuals won't go to seed and you'll get rid of them.
Yeah, also, I'm thinking 6, 8 inches is going to create a little environment for small animals too.
Yeah, exactly.
And which also help sustain insect.
Right. So I would say for people who want to do this, read Doug Tallamy. It's always great to read, first and just kind of think about stuff and get more information. So he's a good place to start. And then, start small, right? I started big. But, start small. Start with an area that's maybe already under garden, but that has non-native plants. And start putting some native plants in there, right? And see what you think of those. And then if you get really fascinated, because what fascinated me, to be honest, was once we put this garden in, was the explosion of insect life, right? And there were more bees than I ever knew existed. There were more flies that looked like bees, nothing like the housefly, right? All these amazing flies, dragonflies, damselflies, and moths, and butterflies. It was just this explosion of insects, which to me was completely fascinating. So if you start to see this happening where you do plant, and get more interested, then there are various ways to kind of in an environmentally friendly way kill portions of your grass, right? And to keep the other weeds from coming up while your natives come up. And yeah, so start small. Be considerate of your neighbors, because the last thing you want is to start it and get neighbors really mad at you, and then you have to go away from it. And then just follow your joy. If you like it, if you like what you're seeing, just keep going for it.
Plus, you get to play in the dirt, and
Yeah.
I think we're running us a clock here, David. Thank you
Okay.
for your experience and expertise.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Carltim Pallisades, CX Media Group production. And please comment, like, and we'll see you later. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tim.
I hope to sing all over the earth, share the songs that make me whole. When I'm free, I wait to gather my pieces till I'm free, and I hope that I'll discover the real me. Yes, I hope that I'll discover the real